Once upon a time, there was a woodworker. One day, he decided to make new legs for his broken chair. He chose a nice log and, without hesitation, grabbed his sharp axe. "Oh dear, will it hurt?" squealed the piece of wood. The woodworker was so frightened that he quickly wanted to get rid of the strange log. He gave it as a gift to his friend Geppetto, who was a shoemaker. Geppetto gladly accepted the gift. He went back to his small workshop and sat down with his chisel. "I will carve a little man," he said to himself. "I will call him Pinocchio. I hope this name brings him lots of luck." First, he carved the hair, then the forehead and the little eyes, which blinked and stared back at him. Has the wood come to life? Wondered the shoemaker, and he began carving the nose. And immediately the nose started growing. No matter what Geppetto did to shorten it, the cheeky nose kept getting longer. Soon, the mouth was ready too. It even smiled and stuck out its tongue. Finally, Geppetto carved the arms and legs. Then the little man kicked him so hard that it knocked his wig off. "Ah, you're not even finished, and already you show disrespect to your father," he scolded him, placing him on the floor to teach him how to walk. As soon as Pinocchio stood on his feet, he ran across the room, opened the door, and dashed outside. "Try to catch him." Poor Geppetto ran after him. "Catch him!" he shouted, but no one helped him. Passers-by stopped in surprise and wondered where this little wooden boy had come from. Fortunately, a policeman appeared from around the corner, grabbed Pinocchio by the nose, and handed him over to Geppetto. The shoemaker could hardly wait to pull the ears of the naughty one, but imagine how surprised he was when he realized he had forgotten to carve them. Pinocchio got scared of the policeman and immediately asked his father for forgiveness. Of course, kind Geppetto was touched and forgave him. When they returned home, he made him a little suit from paper, shoes from bark, and a hat from bread. The little boy was very pleased and kissed the craftsman from the bottom of his heart. "Father Geppetto, I want to thank you for everything you've done for me," it said. "I will go to school to become a smart child and help you when you get old." "Oh, Pinocchio," sighed Geppetto. "We don't have money for textbooks." Then the little man sadly lowered his head. The shoemaker couldn't stand it and said to himself, "Whatever happens, happens." He put on his old velvet jacket and left the house. He returned without the jacket, but with a primer under his arm. "Where is your jacket, father?" Pinocchio asked. "I sold it. I was too hot with it anyway." Pinocchio understood what had happened, threw himself into his father's arms, and kissed him. The next day, he took the primer and went to school. On his way, he thought, "Today I will learn to read, tomorrow to write, and the day after to count. When I become smart, I will earn a lot of money and buy my father a brand new jacket." Suddenly, he heard a merry noise from somewhere. He looked around and immediately forgot about school. He ran to see what was happening and found himself in a square. In the middle of it stood a colorful, round tent. "What is this?" Pinocchio wondered, and a little boy answered him. "Can't you read? This is a puppet theater." "And how much is the ticket?" asked Pinocchio. "4 pennies." "I am selling a primer for 4 pennies," Pinocchio shouted. Poor Geppetto. All his sacrifices, selling his velvet jacket, were in vain. Instead of going to school, Pinocchio sold the primer to buy a ticket for the theater. As soon as he entered the tent, the puppets immediately noticed him. "Pinocchio! Long live our brother Pinocchio!" they shouted from the stage. "Come up to us, Pinocchio!" called Harlequin. The guest jumped onto the stage and was embraced by his wooden relatives. But at that very moment, the theater director appeared, the terrifying Fire Eater. He whipped his long lash, and the poor puppets trembled in fear. Seeing Pinocchio with his bloodshot eyes, the Fire Eater hissed, "Hey you, get off the stage!" And then he added, "Tonight I'll deal with you!" After the performance, the director decided to cook lamb for dinner, but the firewood wasn't enough to start a fire. Then he remembered the wooden boy and shouted, "Pinocchio, come here so I can throw you in the hearth." "Spare me, master!" the boy cried. "I don't want to die! Oh, where are you, Father Geppetto? Where are you to save me?" "You have a father?" the director wondered, and his heart seemed to soften. "If that's the case, he will surely be very sad if you die. Perhaps I should burn Harlequin instead." Then Pinocchio knelt at his feet and shed heartfelt tears. "Have mercy on his life, master! Do not burn Harlequin! Better throw me in the fire!" "Look at him," the villain grinned. "This Pinocchio is a fine boy. Well, never mind. Today I'll eat undercooked lamb." And he asked the guest to tell him his story. After listening to the entire tale of the wooden boy, the Fire Eater thought for a moment. he felt a pang for the shoemaker Geppetto and handed the boy 5 golden coins. "Take them to your father and tell him to buy a new coat," he said. Pinocchio thanked him, hugged all the puppets one by one, and headed home. But on the way, he met the blind cat and the lame fox. They asked him where he was coming from, and Pinocchio shared his adventures. When they heard about the coins, the 2 tricksters concocted a devious plan. "If you really want to make your father happy, you'll need many more of these coins," they said. "But you know, there's a magical place where if you bury 5 gold coins, the next day you'll find 100 times 5. "How is that possible?" Pinocchio asked, astonished. "Very simple," replied the fox. "Have you heard of the Land of Fools? There lies the Field of Wonders. In it grows the great oak. If, at midnight, you dig a hole under the oak's crown and plant at least 5 coins, by morning a tree will grow, and instead of leaves, golden coins will hang from it?" "Wonderful!" Pinocchio exclaimed, and filled with joy, spun on one foot. Then he went with his new friends to the inn, called the Red Crab. They sat down to dine and discuss what to do. The fox and the cat ate their fill, but Pinocchio was so excited that he didn't even try the food. At midnight, the innkeeper woke him up and made him pay the bill. The cat and the fox, for some reason, had already left. The wooden boy parted with one of his 5 coins and set off alone toward the Field of Wonders. Suddenly, 2 figures emerged from the darkness, wearing black sacks over their heads. "Your money or your life!" they shouted. Of course, it was the cat and the fox. Pinocchio had nowhere else to hide the coins, so he stuffed them into his mouth. And since he dared not open it, he couldn't say a word. He remained silent even when the bandits tied a rope around his neck and tightened the noose. "Save me, father," he kept repeating to himself in his mind. The cat and the fox hung him from the great oak and said, "You'll hang here until you open your mouth, but know this, you don't have much time to think." Fortunately, the blue fairy lived nearby. As it grew light, she saw through her window the poor wooden boy, clapped her hands, and her servants, the falcon and the poodle, appeared before her. The fairy first turned to the falcon. "Fly to the great oak," she commanded, "and tear the rope with your beak." Then she turned to the poodle. "And you, take the carriage and bring the boy to me." Soon, the half-dead Pinocchio found himself in a warm and soft bed. The fairy summoned 3 famous doctors, the raven, the owl, and the cricket, who prescribed a very bitter medicine for the boy. As soon as he drank it, Pinocchio immediately recovered. "Tell me how you ended up in the hands of those bandits," said the blue fairy, gently stroking his head. And Pinocchio told her almost everything. Well, he conveniently left out the part about the premier. And when the fairy asked him where his gold coins were, he answered that he had lost them, even though they were actually in his pocket. Suddenly, she started laughing. While they were talking, the wooden boy's nose, which was already quite long, grew by 2 more inches. "Oh, you," said the blue fairy, "why are you lying to me? Can't you see that your own nose is giving you away?" Poor Pinocchio didn't know where to hide from the shame. Then she clapped her hands and called upon a flock of woodpeckers, who pecked at his nose and shortened it. "You must always tell the truth," the fairy advised him, "because when you lie, your nose grows longer. Now go home and give the money to your father." Pinocchio thanked her, hugged her, and rushed to the workshop of his father, Geppetto. But as he passed by the great oak, he once again met... guess who? Yes, the cat and the fox. This time, the naive boy believed the cheats and buried his coins in the Field of Wonders. The next day, he went to see what had grown, but there was nothing. Even the coins had disappeared. So, Pinocchio went back home with empty hands. Geppetto scolded him for being gone so long, but in the end, he forgave him and sent him to school. One might think that after all the adventures Pinocchio had been through, he would have become wiser. But that very same day, he made friends with a lazy boy named Carlo. "Let's go to the Land of Fun," Carlo suggested. There are no schools or primers there, and the children play all day long. Is there really such a wonderful place in the world? Pinocchio wondered. "I'm leaving tonight in a carriage," Carlo replied. "Do you want to come with me?" Of course. Pinocchio immediately forgot all about his father Geppetto. It turned out that Carlo wasn't lying. At midnight, a wonderful carriage appeared out of nowhere. It was pulled by 24 little donkeys, all wearing white boots. A grumpy coachman sat on the driver's seat, cracking a long, long whip. The carriage was full of boys who couldn't wait to reach the Land of Fun. There was no room left for Pinocchio, so he rode one of the donkeys. And the land of fun was exactly as Carlo had described. All the streets were filled with merrymaking, the boys played all day long, and the word school was forbidden. They weren't even allowed to whisper it. How wonderful life is, Pinocchio kept saying every time he met his friend. Just think, my teacher forbade me from being friends with you. But one morning, the wooden boy woke up and saw that instead of his little ears, which Geppetto had never finished carving, there were long, furry ears. What's more, the next day they were even longer and hairier. Pinocchio despaired. He put on his little cap and set off to find little Carlo. When they saw each other, the boys burst into laughter. Both of them had long ears. They laughed until they almost passed out. At one point, Carlo went silent, turned pale, and started swaying. "Help me!" he cried. "I can't stand on my feet." "I can't either," Pinocchio exclaimed, and he too began to wobble. In that moment, their faces turned into gray muzzles, and their bodies were covered with fur. They grew hooves and funny little tails. The boys were terrified and began to cry, but instead of their bright voices, a horrible donkey bray echoed. The grumpy coachman heard them and hurried over to see what was going on. "How wonderful," he said happily, rubbing his hands. "Two more wonderful little donkeys. Tomorrow I'll sell them for 4 gold coins." Carlo ended up in a rural stable while Pinocchio was taken to the circus. There they taught him to perform various funny tricks. Oh, those were hard times. Every day the trainer whipped him and fed him only straw. Once he was made to jump through a hoop, but unfortunately Pinocchio tripped and hurt his back leg. Then the circus owner called for the stableman. "I don't need a lame donkey," he said. "Take him to the market tomorrow and sell him." "But who would want to buy a lame donkey?" "I will," said a man, handing a few pennies to the stableman. "I need a donkey's skin for a drum." When Pinocchio heard what fate awaited him, he cried out sadly. But there was no one to save him. The buyer took him to the shore, tied his hoof with a string, hung a stone around his neck, and pushed him into the water. Then he sat down and waited for the little donkey to drown so he could pull it out, skin it, and make a drum from its hide. Weighed down by the heavy stone, Pinocchio sank all the way to the sea floor. There, he suddenly remembered all the sorrows he had caused his father Geppetto, and he became very sad. He decided to call for the help of the Blue Fairy. She heard him immediately and sent some kind fish to the sea, who ate the donkey meat, but left the wooden body of the boy untouched. And when the buyer pulled the string out of the water, instead of a dead donkey, there hung Pinocchio. The poor man was so scared that he started stuttering. "Where did the donkey go, the one I just pushed into the water?" he wondered. "I am that donkey," Pinocchio answered, laughing uncontrollably. "You?" the man shouted angrily. "You swindler! Don't be mad. Untie the string and I'll explain everything," Pinocchio pleaded. But the man was furious. Finally, the man agreed to listen to him, and the boy told him everything from beginning to end. When he finished his story, the buyer shouted, "Do you think I'm crazy? I don't believe a word you say. I paid money for you, and now I want it back. I'll take you back to the market and sell you for firewood." At that, Pinocchio stuck his tongue out, dove into the sea, and swam far away. Out of the waves, a massive blue whale suddenly leapt, chasing the wooden boy through the water with a powerful surge, its mouth wide open. Pinocchio got scared and desperately splashed with his hands and feet. He swam faster and faster, but the monster caught up to him, opened its giant mouth, and swallowed him whole. The poor boy slid into the whale's stomach so fast that he felt nauseous. When he finally stopped, everything around him was pitch black. "Help! Help me!" Pinocchio cried, crawling on all fours. Suddenly, a distant light flickered. Soon the flame of a thin candle was visible. A little more, and... no, it couldn't be. "Father Geppetto, is that you?" "Pinocchio, my son!" Crying with joy, they hugged each other and started telling their adventures. "I searched for you on land day and night and couldn't find you," Father Geppetto began. "Then I made a boat to continue searching for you at sea. But a terrible storm broke out. The waves capsized the boat, and I was swallowed by a massive whale. Luckily, that same day, it had eaten the remains of a sunken ship. In its hold, there was plenty of food, and that's how I didn't die from hunger." "I'm so happy to see you again, Father Geppetto," said Pinocchio. "Now we must escape from here as soon as possible." They held hands and started climbing towards the throat. Luckily, the monster was sleeping with its mouth open, as it had asthma. So Pinocchio managed to crawl out and swam with all his might, while Father Geppetto sat on his back. When they reached the shore, the old man shivered from the cold. "Lean on my hand, Father," said Pinocchio, and led him along the deserted shore. Soon they saw an abandoned hut and went inside to warm up. The boy noticed that the shoemaker had a fever, and he prepared a comfortable bed of straw for him. "I'll go find some milk to feed you," he said. It turned out that this was not an easy task. Pinocchio had to walk alone for several fields before reaching a village. There, he heard the mooing of cows and asked the farmer for some milk. "I'll give it to you. Why wouldn't I?" replied the farmer. "But how will you pay me back? My donkey died yesterday, and I don't have money to buy a new one. If you're willing to do its work, I'll give you milk and bread every morning." Pinocchio agreed, and for several days, he worked from dawn to dusk, carrying food to his sick father, Geppetto. Then he started making baskets. From time to time, he went to the market to sell them and spent his money wisely. In the evening, he would study to read and write. One day, Pinocchio overheard that the Blue Fairy was seriously ill. Without thinking twice, he sent her all the money he had saved up until then. That evening, he dreamt that she came to reward him for his kind heart. And the next day, he looked in the mirror and couldn't believe his eyes. There, in the reflection, was a beautiful boy made of flesh and blood. Father Geppetto was deeply moved and hugged him tightly. And where was the previous Pinocchio? "There he is," said the old shoemaker, pointing to the wooden puppet sitting on the chair. "How wonderful it is that I'm now a real boy," said the living Pinocchio, and out of joy he spun around on one foot.